a lot of times you hear these young guys like, hey, I'm going to go out and get like $20 million of investor capital. Great, but maybe you should slow down a little bit because $20 million doesn't mean you're bringing in $20 million. And very wealthy people know how to keep their money, and you're not quite there yet, so slow down and make sure that you don't get the short end of the stick type of thing.
All right, Michael Senderovich, welcome to Beyond Fulfillment.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here. So, Michael, you have been an entrepreneur basically your whole adult life, and you've had quite a roller coaster of a journey, I guess you could say. So some high highs, some low lows, and then completely reinvented yourself in a brand new industry. So a lot of value I think you can provide to our audience. But just to set the stage, can you talk about your backstory and how you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know if it was a smart decision or a foolish decision looking back on it. I think it was kind of a foolish decision to go into business on my own at 21. Not necessarily on my own, I had a business partner at the time, but it was a very short-lived business partnership. It's been a long journey and it's been a crazy journey, and luckily, thank God now, like things have stabilized. Only probably within the last like 5 to 6 years have really stabilized. So it's been a lot. I just a few days ago, actually, I turned 40. So we had this conversation with a lot of different people that are in my community. It's like, hey, what kind of wisdom do you have so far? And I'm thinking like, I don't know. I guess I got to kind of sit down. I'm sure all the stories that I've had with everything that's happened in business, maybe there's some wisdom there. I hope there is. This is like, I guess, the time for me to apply the wisdom according to all the village elders that I was talking to.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you started, like you said, you had a short-lived business partnership that ended pretty quickly. And then you had some massive success early on in the debt collection industry. And you basically became a millionaire at age 25. Can you just talk about how that all unfolded?
Yeah. So I got into the debt collection industry just sort of by accident. I was in college and I needed a job. I was working for a timeshare company, and I was always in sales. And I'm really good at it. I'm sure you can tell I like to talk a lot. So, in sales, talking's not a bad thing. And one of my best friends at the time, we went to high school together, was working for this company. He said, hey, I can get you a job. So I interviewed as a debt collector initially, and the business owner was a very smart guy and said, you're absolutely not doing this. You're going to be terrible at it, but I'm going to put you on sales. And that's what I did. I did that for a few years, and we got some really great contracts for the business. And then I kind of thought about it, and I said, listen, like, I think it's maybe time for me to transition out. And if I could do this for someone, I could do this for someone else, or for myself, rather. And that's what we did. I started in a janitor's closet in a small office building, which belonged to my friend. And after a few months, we got in some clients, and it was a slow grind, a very, very slow grind for about a year. Just the kind of the ego of, hey, why aren't people calling me? We had no foundation in the business, whatsoever. We had no presence. We were nobodies, really. Yes, like I was a salesperson at a company for a few years, but that didn't really mean anything. I couldn't go back, and I wouldn't go back to get those clients that I brought in. I do have some ethics. So things moved very slowly, and then all of a sudden, we just kind of figured it out. Something clicked where there was a particular industry that we wanted to target, and that industry was payday loans, auto title loans, basically, high-risk loans. And we started targeting those industries because there was a lot of volume there. So we kind of switched things up, and finally we were getting some traction and some cash flow. And I took that cash flow and reinvested it into salespeople. And those salespeople started calling on larger and larger leads, and we ended up landing some very, very large contracts pretty much throughout the country. And that's when things really took off. And right before that, I knew that the writing was kind of on the wall. I needed to separate from my business partner because it was essentially an absent, kind of business partner. He would kind of just check in and collect his check. And he wasn't supposed to be like that. He was supposed to be someone that was supposed to help me. It was a 50-50 partnership. And on his end, he was really knowledgeable about the actual operational side of the business, whereas I was just knowledgeable on how to, set up a marketing campaign and set up sales. So the writing was on the wall, like I said, and I called an attorney, and we were able to, cut a check for him, and we amicably walked away from each other, and that was essentially it, with my business relationship with him. And then within like 3 months, we had landed just even more, crazy, just crazy for us contracts. I mean, these were multi-million-dollar a year contracts. And then, we bought ourselves out of the lease that we were in, leased a large kind of like a mixed industrial space. I was into the, mixed industrial look with the open like roofs and the HVAC and all that stuff. It was very kind of trendy and fashionable at that point. So I was like, wow, this is a great space. We built it out. We had a wonderful call center there and great offices. And the ball just, it was like an avalanche. Within months, we were just raking in a lot of money. And on paper, yeah, I was a millionaire. And then things kind of progressed, and we were doing really, really well. And apparently we were doing a little too well for one of our largest client, actually the largest client. We didn't know that on the back end, they were actually looking to sell the business off. And they were looking to stabilize their book of debt. And that was actually a very smart strategy of theirs to get more money for the business. So all of a sudden, we're working, and we've got a lot of placements, and we've got a lot of people on payroll. And we get an email, hey, hang tight. We're not going to do any placements for you. And debt collection is an interesting business where you get just like large bits of data, and that data is those people that owe money to the client. And from there, things kind of just got a little messy. It was like 3 weeks, 4 weeks go by, then a couple of months, then 3 months, then 6 months goes by, and I'm calling the client, going, hey, what's going on? What did we do wrong? What is it? What's the problem? We're not getting any placements from you anymore. And they are like, no, you're doing great. We're just trying to figure some things out. We'll get back to you. Everything's just, thank you for everything that you've done so far. And at this point, this is a very, very large client and sustaining quite a few employees. And so I had to start laying people off and tell them, look, as soon as they come back on board, I will give you a call. Please come back in. And that just never happened. And then there was more regulation that came into that industry. This is around 2010. You have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that came in, and it was burdensome, for us to do what we needed to do in order to make money. And the profit margins just kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And at that point, the burnout was real. I literally, at that point, I'd worked, I think, nonstop for 4 years without really any kind of rest, like no weekends, no nothing really. And as a 20-something, you kind of want to get out there, and you want to see people and friends and see the world. And that's not what I was living. I was literally going to the office at 6:30 every morning, and then coming back home, probably around that same time, and just eating, going to sleep, and repeat, which I saw as like, this is what I need to do. These are the hours that I need to put in. I've got to be the sweat equity guy, and I have to show my team that I'm the sweat equity guy so that they could see that we're all on the same page. And the burnout just started getting crazy. It was getting really crazy. Anxiety, wasn't sleeping at night. I went to a doctor. The doctor looks at me and goes, how old are you? I'm like, I'm in my, you have my chart. He's like, you don't look like that. You look just terrible. Bags under the eyes. And he's like, are you getting any sleep? Do you have kids? I was like, no, not yet. So something had to change. And at that point, I just decided that I didn't want to do it anymore. And we sold off whatever we could sell off. And I went back to school to get my MBA. And then started doing research on the insurance industry, actually different industries, because I was looking at real estate and insurance and a couple of different industries where I could get into something without much cash, because at that point I had nothing but debt. There was no cash. When you have a client that is like 80% of your business and then all of a sudden overnight they disappear, you got to figure things out. And I was trying to keep people on payroll for as long as I possibly could. So there was no cash left over. I was looking at the insurance business, and I saw that there is a really desperate need for people to come into the industry. For every 4 people that were retiring, only 1 person was coming in. And this was 15 years ago, so it's just as bad, if maybe not worse now. And insurance is one of those things where you can kind of work it like real estate. When you bring in a client, there's about a 90% chance that client's going to renew with you. So if you keep building and building and building on that book, it's kind of like real estate. You're building a real estate portfolio, and I love that. And that's one of the ways that I transitioned into the insurance business. And I don't know how much time we have, but there's there's story after story with the insurance business as well, right?
Yeah,
so there's quite a lot.
We'll get into that. Let's just go back to the debt collection, because you had, like you said, like a really meteoric rise, and then it kind of crashed and burned. So, I mean, when that all happened, right? And I appreciate all the detail, because, you get out of this bad partnership, You reinvest the money. You're a sales guy. You reinvest the money, you grow, you go into this new industry with a high risk debt, you get all these clients, the money's pouring in. You get a new space, right? Like you said, the trendy office building, I'm sure, right? Expensive, but the money's coming. And for a young kid, right? Because you hear all the stats about what it really takes to build a business, and most people take years and years, and it's usually later in life where people see the real success. For a young kid to just be grinding and have things take off. Like, do you think part of the problem was maybe succeeding too quickly and just having that mindset where like, wow, it's just going to continue like this on, and it's we're just going to be rolling from here on out?
100%. And also the lack of mentorship, because when you're that young, the ego is probably going to control most of the things that you do. And there wasn't anyone there to say like, hey, maybe you should look at things a little bit differently. Maybe you should slow down here, or have a little bit of a strategy where you have something to fall back on there. I didn't really surround myself with the appropriate people. One of the reasons why I did that is that I'm more of an introvert, and I kind of just, I put my head down and do the work. And it's tough for me to reach out and ask for help. And I think that's really important, is especially if you're a young entrepreneur, is to get someone that's smarter than you. And there are many people, most people are probably, and I say this kind of, for my experience, and just to talk through with them, and just you have to have a vision for the future. When you're young, it's like, it's a day by day thing, especially with buying something. You're like, okay, I bought something and I'm really happy with that thing. And then the next day it's kind of like, okay, well, I got to find something else to replace that thing with. And when you're looking at numbers, right, when it's not cold hard cash, because everything was obviously digital, you're looking at those numbers and they're kind of up and down a little bit and side to side, and it's really not that big of a deal. But when that number really takes a dive, that's what really takes a really, really tough person to handle that. And I wasn't tough. At that point, I definitely wasn't tough. That's why I wasn't sleeping. And, I had these health problems. So, yeah, I think that, slowing down is kind of key. My wife, whenever I try to get ahead of myself, she's like, look, slow and steady wins the race. You're not the rabbit here. It's like, hang on.
If you're still trying to hire locally for every role on your team, you're leaving serious money on the table. Ocean's Talent places AI fluent executive operators. We're talking finance, marketing, operations, EAs, fully vetted, full-time, and dedicated to your business. These aren't freelancers or shared resources. They're U.S. caliber talent at a fraction of the cost, backed by a 3-month guarantee. And right now, Beyond Fulfillment listeners get $1,000 off their first hire. Go to oceanstalent.com/Dave to claim it. So when that all, happened too, because, right, you lose your biggest client, and I guess they were purposely kind of doing all these placements and giving you so much business to basically position themselves to get acquired. And so it was almost kind of artificial, right? And maybe even feels like, wow, success, success, success. And then next thing you know, out of nowhere, gone. The client's gone. They don't even tell you what's going on. Months and months go by. You probably had a bloated payroll for too long, right? When you finally realized what happened, and then kind of you're like upside down, basically, almost overnight, like what was that internal conversation like?
The internal conversation is where am I right now? Do I like the place that I'm in? Do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? Is this an industry that I want to stay in? And all the answers were no. Look, the insurance industry I love, and that's why I've been doing it for 15 years. But the financial and debt collection industry, I hated. I just couldn't stand what I was doing. There was a lot of different reasons, and it's not just, hey, we're calling people and you're trying to be nasty to them to get money out of them. In fact, our approach was completely different. The nastier that we were, or the nastier that my collectors were, the less result they had. So we kind of, changed things up a little bit here and there. It's a self-realization thing that thank God I had. And I had some support from my family, and they said, look, you know what you're doing, kind of in a way. You're good at this, talking and sales thing. We're sure you can apply it in a different place. And going back to school, looking at people that were in the corporate world, I still just couldn't do that. I couldn't, do the whole climbing the corporate ladder thing, even though I was getting my MBA, and I could have, had the connections. It's just I really wanted something that I was capable of doing first and foremost, but also something that I wouldn't hate and something that would really benefit people. Not to say that there's no benefit in debt collection; it's an absolutely necessary business. But here, I'm solving problems and I'm helping people grow their business. And yes, I was helping my clients grow their business by stabilizing their debt. And obviously, there's definite opinions of short-term lending. These are not the cleanest of businesses in most aspects. And there's a reason why there's a lot of regulation. There is predatory lending involved in these, but that's kind of the name of the game. So I just didn't want to be associated with that. And quite frankly, the burnout of hiring people and firing people and all that stuff, like the turnover is crazy in debt collection. And most people in the debt collection industry, and I say this with all due respect, especially collectors, not the most savory characters. They tend to have a lot of problems in their personal lives and their own financial problems, and you have to basically be a master of dealing with people, which is not to say that's any different in this business, but it's a little bit more labor intensive, I guess you could say. The HR was nuts.
Hmm. Okay. And through all that, what do you think's the most important lesson you took from that whole experience?
Wow, there's quite a lot, but I guess like the primary lesson would be is just to slow down and really think things through and not try to satisfy a lot of different people. And I was trying to make sure that my employees were making more money. Like I wanted them to drive nicer cars. They would come in, let's say, on their car, and I would bring them into a meeting and say, what can we do to make you more money so that you can get a better car? Not even thinking if they wanted a better car or not. It was just a conversation that I was having with them. So now it's a completely different approach. It's like, how can we help people? But before we can help people, we really have to listen to what it is that they need. Our outreach, for example, right now is like, hey, how can we help you? What kind of business are you in, and what kind of problems are you potentially looking at that we can help wrap up with the insurance products that we have?
All right, so let's talk about insurance. So you go through this kind of epiphany, you go back and get your MBA, you really think things through and look at the industry you want to be involved in, you settle on insurance. You didn't really have any experience in that industry going in, but you obviously had a sales background, you were good, you understood business, right? So talk about what that was like getting this new business off the ground.
Brutal, in some ways even more brutal than collections. Because insurance is very heavily regulated. You have to get your licensing done, and you have to get your bonding, and your own insurances in place. And unfortunately, I had a really bad experience with a mentor. At that point, I was kind of like, okay, I really need mentorship here, and I sought it out, and I got connected to a gentleman that was somewhat local to me in the same city. LA is kind of tough because it's very spread out. I'm in the valley, he's in the city, so local is kind of a light and fast term. So I started working kind of with him, and he was sort of giving me some direction, and then it came time to collect my commissions, and he goes, we didn't agree to this. I was just mentoring you. And it was a lot of money, especially for me who didn't have any money. And that was a really, really tough pill to swallow. But I learned enough from him to go, okay, I don't have to go through you. I can do this myself. And I started contacting the companies that they were working with. And insurance is an interesting place. A lot of people don't understand that it's very similar to like a grocery store, where we're the retail grocery store, but we have to get the groceries, and the groceries are the products. We have to get the groceries from somewhere, right? So you either get direct appointment with a carrier where the grocery gets sent to you directly, or you go through wholesalers. And in the business world, wholesalers are quite prevalent. So I started reaching out to a ton of wholesalers and getting access to more and more markets. And for the first few years, I was kind of a jack of all trades. Hey, let me do your homeowners, let me do this. I mean, it was desperation, quite frankly. I just needed to get cash flowing. And then as things progressed, my book started growing, and I was on paper doing really well, but financially it was really tough because there was not much of a margin. There was just too many things to keep track of. Everything from customer service to carrier relationships to, hey, I don't like you for your auto insurance anymore, so I'm going to pull my business auto insurance policy or my business whatever policy as well. And it just became kind of sort of too political in a way, and then too just cumbersome to deal with. And I had the realization that specializing in business is what I really like. And honestly, when you do a lot of homeowners policies, it's the same thing, the same series of questions. Hey, when was your roof replaced? How recent is your plumbing and all that? And it just became very boring to me. And business just was never boring. I always kind of wanted to do more business insurance. And I realized, like, okay, we have to pick certain target markets, and we have to really put everything into those target markets, learn everything about them, and not necessarily specialize, because specialize in the insurance world is a tough term to use, because really the only specialists are like coverage attorneys, because interpretation of policies is a tricky subject. But we do have a certain level of knowledge in business insurance, and that's where we're really shining. And within the last, I would say, like 5.5 to 6 years, things really took a turn. Business became very profitable, and growth is very steady, somewhere between 28 and 30% per year. And things are just going well. And at this point, I can take the time to do a podcast like this, or I could take the time to take my kids to school, or give my wife a break or something like that, because at this point, the portfolio is growing. So things are, thank God, much better. And right now, it's all about me helping the team that I have to build more business, and they're doing great, thank God.
Okay. All right. So you get into insurance. It's very tough in the early going, right? You're doing a lot of different things, and you realize that you need to really specialize, and business is where your mind was. So you niche down in business, and so you've had this company 15 years, but really just within the last 6 years or so did things really start to stabilize and get a strong upward trajectory. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Early success, and then you crash and burn, you serious health problems, kind of soul searching thereafter, you settle on insurance. It's a grind getting started, and almost a decade goes by before you really get a handle on everything, become profitable, and really have a strong foundation. Given what you went through, what's that feel like when you finally get things going in the right direction and you start to experience this type of upward trajectory?
It's like a burden that has been removed. The weight off my shoulders is still there, or on my shoulders is still there. I still have a family to, obviously provide for, but there's like light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, okay, it's working. Now we just have to repeat it. Just figuring out how to make the business work. That was the first 10 years. And then after that, things just started progressing and growing. And now it's just like, okay, what do we need to do to continue the growth? Make sure that we're not going into places that we're not supposed to be going. Like, for example, we don't do truckers insurance. Been there, done that. Couldn't make it profitable. So if I have a new producer coming in, hey, I really know a lot about trucking, I'm unfortunately not the agency for you. Go somewhere else and you'll have a lot more success there. So having the ability to also say no, and not having the desperation of trying to be the jack of all trades to everyone and trying to service all kinds of different industries, we stick to, I would say we have like probably 5 primary industries, and industries outside of that we can service, but sometimes, and a lot of times actually, we'll get a phone call and, hey, I need you to help me with this. Sorry, we can't help you with that. So yeah, it feels good, I guess. It's kind of the short answer here.
Okay. And I mean, at the time too, with the debt collection stuff, right? I'm sure that was all traumatic, right? But then looking back at it all these years later, and given what you've built now, I mean, does it almost seem like without that experience, you couldn't have maybe really had this type of success you're experiencing now with going through that and really learning? Because it's one thing to hear about it, but really experiencing it, right? Do you think that really made you a much better entrepreneur for where you are now?
Yeah, just a better person, I think. When you're dealing with so much adversity, look, it's all relative, right? Like I feel like I went through a lot, but compared to what people go through, I haven't really gone through that much. It's tough starting a business, but money comes and goes. You'll figure it out eventually, and there's always looking for a job, and you'll probably be all right. Especially someone like me, where I have an MBA, so I could probably get a job somewhere and with pretty decent pay. So yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful place to be right now, but slowing down really was like kind of the core thing, and just making sure that I'm not running into different directions. Focus, focus, focus. I kind of talked to you briefly about systems. Like, I read the book E-Myth just as I got out of actually my MBA. I graduated and then I got the book. I was like, why did I even get an MBA? I could have just read this book, over and over and over again and really set up my systems. And once you get that, like once things finally start clicking, it feels really good. But yeah, slowing down is really important. Just putting your ego aside and really reaching out for help. One thing that I really like doing now is when I've got younger people coming to me, I did some teaching for 3 years at a trade school. That's kind of like my outreach and my giving back. And a lot of times you hear these young guys like, hey, I'm going to go out and get like $20 million of investor capital. Great, but maybe you should slow down a little bit, because $20 million doesn't mean you're bringing in $20 million. And very wealthy people know how to keep their money, and you're not quite there yet, so slow down and make sure that you don't get the short end of the stick type of thing.
Hey, let me tell you about Max Capital Hub. If you're an entrepreneur trying to get funding, but your credit's holding you back, these are the people to call. They do business loans, business funding, and they'll actually help you clean up your credit so you qualify for more. They're not just handing you paperwork, their team builds an actual strategy around your business. So if you've been stuck or the bank has told you no, give Max Capital Hub a call or book a free consultation at maxcapitalhub.com. Tell them I sent you. And looking back at the whole journey, right, the ups, the downs, and kind of like the ability to slow down, and now having the ability to say no and be very specific about what you will and won't do, and sticking to that, what's been the best part of being an entrepreneur for you?
Freedom. It doesn't sound like I had much freedom, because I really didn't, but now the freedom is there. My wife is an attorney. She works for a wonderful firm, but she doesn't have the freedom that I have. And that is really important, especially in a dual income household. We've got kids, and we're, thank God willing, going to have more kids. And we need to be able to have that flexibility. Unfortunately, with our parents, we don't have a big support system within the house, and the kids are pretty young. So thank God I have the ability now to do what I need to do. If my wife, being an attorney, especially in her line of work, she does real estate law, which is nuts. She has stayed up many a night, 24 hours sometimes, literally, of just chugging along, trying to make sure that the client doesn't lose everything that they have. And that's really, I think that's helped our marriage. It's helped our personal lives. But, still to this day, it's like, we got to keep trucking, got to keep pushing. Every time I bring in a new producer, it kind of reminds me of the early days, because if I bring in a new producer, now I am at their beck and call essentially 24/7, because I have to make sure that they're set up in a way where they're not going towards failure, they're going towards success, right? So I have to give them the time that I need to give them, but still, there's a process to that, thankfully with eMyth, where I can walk through things with them pretty quickly and say, okay, these are the steps that you need to take. And once you've mastered those steps, you can come back to me if you have, any more specific questions.
If your business is an e-commerce brand, this message is for you. Logistics can make or break you. If you're tired of being just a number to those big box 3PLs, you need to check out our team at Easy DC 3PL. We're a different kind of partner, built specifically for growing brands that ship between 1,000 and 10,000 orders per month. We offer warehousing, fulfillment, and transportation with a focus on personalized service and flexibility. Our central Kentucky location gives you nationwide reach, turning logistics into a competitive advantage. So if you're ready to partner with a 3PL that actually gets your brand, visit easydc3pl.com. All right. And so if people want to learn more about the insurance services you offer, or reach out to you for any other reason, what's the best way people can find you online?
Sure. Yeah, you could go to 613ins.com. That's our website. And if you would like a quote, there's a very simple process on the website to request a quote, whether it be workers' compensation, commercial auto, general liability, et cetera. We have pretty much everything that you can think of when it comes to business insurance, with the exception of benefits. We do not handle benefits, but we do have some great referrals that we can provide to our clients, or even if you're not a client, if you just have any questions. And we're not licensed in every single state, but wherever it is that folks are calling from, I'm happy to take 5-10 minutes, if I put you on my calendar, and go through what you have and give you some direction if needed.
Okay. All right. And if people want to reach out to you for any other reason, is it LinkedIn or anywhere else they can find you?
My email, I'm not super active on LinkedIn. I don't have enough time to do that, but my email is just michael@613ins.com. entrepreneurship.com. Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to, put some time together to chat with you.
Okay. And we'll link all that in the show notes for everyone. All right, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and sharing all this incredible wisdom from your journey with our listeners. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.